Hello everyone. Today I wanted to make another video to go along with my series, Stories of the Saints. If you are new to my channel, this is kind of a little series that I started where I research the life of a saint, or in this video it'll be a few saints, and kind of learn about what was important throughout their life, what they did for the world, and kind of what we can learn and take away from them for our own lives. And yeah, so let's get into it. So I like making these videos because I think it's really important to, like I had said, kind of model ourselves after these saints and to help us grow in holiness just like they did. It's important to know that these people were not perfect, just like we are not perfect, and they did their best to live their life in a way that was pleasing to God and in a way that allowed them to grow in holiness. And that's why it takes a while for a saint to be canonized, because in order for a saint to be canonized, there has to be some sort of miracle that happened after their death. In order for the church to get enough proof of that, it takes a good amount of time. But for anybody that doesn't know, Catholics believe that the saints that have died are in heaven. So anybody that has a saint before their name, we know that they are in heaven because the church has canonized them. So anybody that gets to heaven is also a saint. But the ones that we have in the church, which I don't know how many there are canonized, but those are the ones that are guaranteed to be in heaven. Again, we don't worship the saints. I've talked about this in the past too. But we do want to, we can pray, to them to pray for us in a way that as if you would ask your friend to pray for you. So it's just asking them for extra prayers. And yeah, so for anybody that's wondering about that, that's kind of the main reason that we have saints. It's just God uses people in all sorts of ways. And just because their life on here is done doesn't mean that their mission is done. So, but yeah, so let's just get into who I'm talking about today. So this is kind of a little bit of a unique video because it's a family of saints, which it's, I think, the only family that has 3 canonized saints in their family. I could be wrong. But I thought I had read that somewhere, that that there isn't any other situation like this, where both the mom and the dad and then the daughter are all canonized in the church. So if you are not familiar, it is Saint Zélie Martin and Saint Louis Martin, and their daughter, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux, which she's a very popular saint. So I'm sure if you guys know about the saints, you've heard of her. But her parents are actually saints as well. And I will kind of get into why that is. And also I have my notes down here, so if I kind of looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So, okay, so before they knew each other, St. Louis Martin was a watchmaker. He was attempting to go into religious life, but because of his inability to be able to learn Latin, he was not able to join the religious order. So yeah, so he ended up kind of having to find a different route. And then similarly, Saint Zélie also was trying to pursue religious life, and she also was not able to be a part of her order. They rejected her in a way. So she ended up becoming a lace maker. She was a very talented lace maker in France, and she had opened her own business, which I thought was really neat, being that she's a female in the 1800s. This all happened. They were married in 1858. So this all happened around that time. So really cool that she had her own lace making business, and eventually they were able to meet up and they got married. And the first year of their marriage, they actually were celibate. So they decided to wait on that, and then eventually God kind of led them into wanting to start a family. So they ended up having 9 children altogether, and within 2 years' time, they lost 4 of their children, 2 boys and 2 girls. So there was 5 girls remaining. So each one of these losses was obviously devastating to their family, but they really relied on God to lean into him and to give them strength through that time. And anything that you read, it always says that there was so much joy, despite their sorrow, there was so much joy in their households, and they were able to maintain that and give their remaining children a happy childhood and a happy upbringing. So that's really inspiring, and I think it's one of the reasons that, they use their suffering in order to get closer to God. As I've talked about in the past, how important it is to offer up our suffering and to try not to run away from it, but to just endure the times that, the trials that we have to go through, because God uses that to grow us. So their youngest daughter was Saint Thérèse of Lisieux. So she was born in 1873. And when she was a baby, the doctors were worried that she wouldn't survive infancy. So again, the Martin family had to surrender and kind of prepare for another loss. But because of their strong faith in God and everything else, they were able to overcome that season, and Saint Thérèse was able, with the help of nurses and doctors, to survive past infancy, and obviously made it into much longer than that. So yeah, she was the youngest daughter. And when I was researching this, I loved this quote that they have. So it says, "Little Thérèse was blonde, blue-eyed, affectionate, stubborn, alarmingly precocious. She could throw a giant-sized tantrum, but her bubbling laughter could make a gargoyle smile." So I thought that was just really cute, that it just kind of shows, obviously she had a personality. So yeah, she later wrote a book called Story of a Soul later in life. But she recounts how happy her childhood was and joyful. Like I said, the family just, despite all of their hardship that they went through, were able to maintain that joy. But sadly, when she was 4, her mother passed away from breast cancer. So once again, another huge, devastating trial for the family to go through. Her father was now a widower, and he moved the family to Lisieux, France, just for a change of scenery, I guess. So yeah, when they moved there, St. Thérèse had a really difficult time adjusting with the loss of her mother, being only 4 years old. And she was having a difficult time during school. So they ended up pulling her out of school, and her oldest sister eventually taught her her schooling. So she got really close to her. And then a little while after that, I don't know the sister's name, but she decided to join the convent along with eventually all of her other sisters. So out of the five girls that remained, all of them ended up joining the convent, which is really amazing as well. But yeah, so this was really devastating for Saint Thérèse, because she felt like she lost her second mother figure. So through this time, she kind of started to develop something that doctors weren't really able to diagnose. To me, it just sounds like a lot of trauma and maybe anxiety that made her ill. So she ended up having like high fevers and just a lot of health complications around the age of 9 or so. And then throughout this time, she started to grow in her faith a little bit and started to surrender this illness that she was going through. And she started to pray to Mary for a cure. So there was a statue of Mary in her room, and as she was praying to it, the statue just radiated with kindness and joy. She said it just kind of glowed in her room. And now today that statue is called Our Lady of the Smile. So after that, she was able to overcome that period of her life, and it just helped her to grow stronger in her faith. On Christmas Eve, 1884, she had a conversion of her spirit, and she felt like she needed to start practicing dying to herself. So she started to pray for somebody who was a criminal in prison for his conversion, and he was a murderer as well. He was set to be executed in 1887, but before he was set to be executed, he had a conversion, and this was the first time that St. Thérèse was able to really see how important offering things up and praying for a soul is. And so this really motivated her to continue this later into her life. Around the age of 15, she decided to join the convent. So with her father's permission, they went to the Vatican to ask the Pope if it would be okay for her to join the convent, since she was younger than the age that they typically would allow people to join. So the Pope ended up saying that, talk to your authorities and see what they say, basically. And without hesitation, St. Therese said, well, if you allow it, then they will allow it. So yeah, she always kind of had that sort of stubbornness to her, which I guess served her well later in life. Later on, when she became a nun, her sisters in the convent had said that she was a good nun, nothing more. Basically that she didn't really stand out as anything crazy special, but just always kind of got her work done in the way that she was supposed to. And this was kind of her whole way of life, right? She's called the little flower. So her main motto was to do little things for Christ. So she used the people around her to sanctify her. And I think this is something we can all really learn from, because we all deal with difficult people throughout life or difficult circumstances. And it's just important to be able to know how to respond to that in a way that Christ would. So she said that people sometimes would irritate her, but instead of getting frustrated, she would learn to pray for strength. And there was a story about how I think a nun was cleaning or something like that, making a loud noise, and it kept going on, and she eventually started to sing a hymn to it and started to use that as prayer for herself. So I think things like that are just kind of funny, that she was able to change her mindset. And I think that's really important for all of us, because there's always things like that are going to come up in life, but basically we just need to be able to have control over our tempers and to choose joy and to choose love, and to look at that person through a Christ-like lens, I guess, in a way, to see what he would do in that circumstance. So that's kind of what she did throughout her life. She also talked about falling asleep during prayer, which is something that I have struggled with sometimes in the past. And she eventually was able to realize that, God listens to us while we're awake, and he listens to us while we're asleep. So if we know that our intention is there, God still uses those prayers. Obviously, you don't necessarily want to make a habit of that, but if that's something that you struggle with too, then just knowing that you're not the only person. And obviously somebody who became a great saint also talks about struggling with that during her prayer times. Some of her quotes I really, really love. So she said, "I longed for the everlasting repose of heaven, that never-ending Sunday of the fatherland." She talks about how much she loved Sundays growing up and spending time with her family, and they would go for walks with their family. So just a really amazing thought to think of heaven as an everlasting Sunday and a day of rest, and to spend time with family and the joy in that. So I thought that was kind of a cool thought that she had. Another quote that she has is, "I forgot myself to please others, and in doing so became happy myself." That's something that I find with myself whenever I'm going through something difficult. If I just try to take the focus off of me and do something good for others, it makes you realize how your problems really aren't that important. There's always somebody going through worse things than you are, and it just changes your perspective, I guess. So this is something we can try to model ourselves after too. I think that's why in our world today so many people struggle with depression and anxiety, because we live in a really self-centered society, and we don't really know how to take the focus off of ourselves. So trying to model ourselves in that way is also really important. She said, "If we maintain the right attitude, then nothing shall remain that can't be accomplished. The good God does not need years to accomplish his work of love from a soul. One ray from his heart can in an instant make his flower bloom for eternity." When we have a problem, we shouldn't ask God to solve it, but instead to pray for strength. So yeah, she ended up getting tuberculosis, and she died at the age of 24, and she is a doctor of the church. I think she's the youngest doctor of the church. So yeah, the main things that we can take away from her is just her attitude towards life. And same with her parents, you know, they all had this joy that just radiated from them despite their struggles. And I think that's just so important for us to try to muster up that kind of joy in ourselves. And the way to do that really is to keep growing in holiness, keep getting closer to God, you know, spending time in prayer and just changing, like they always talk about your heart posture. Like if someone is a thorn in your side, like Paul talks about, just changing your heart and realizing that God is using this time or that person or the struggle, whatever, to sanctify you and to help you to grow in holiness. So don't waste your suffering. That's my main thing I always say. And it's something I tell myself too, because it is hard to be in it and live in it, but it will be worth it in the end. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.